dragons, 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 dragons. Okay, so we started with a time travel story. The first part was, our main character visits a world gone bad, and he then goes back to the past and changes it, and then a world gone worse. Although Tarkir really likes it this way. But for everybody else, a world gone worse. And so we knew we needed to have, what was the worst? What crazy ending did we have? What world did we come to? Like, we started with a warlord world. What was nuttier than that? So we went to the creative team and we said to them, we need a bad world going into an even worse world. And they came back and they said, okay, first we have warlords. I'm like, oh, okay, sounds good. Into dragons. And I'm like, sold. We can do dragons. So we knew going in, this was the set where we have done quote unquote dragon sets in the past in which there weren't a lot of dragons. We're not making that mistake anymore. This is a dragon set. This will have more dragons packed in per square inch than any set we've ever done. This is the highest ASFAN of dragons. This is gonna be the dragon set. That was the plan.
The most important aspect of the Dragons of Tarkir design is, this is a shocker, the dragons. We knew this was the dragon set. We were going to blow dragons out of the water. There were going to be more dragons in this set than any other set in history by a wide margin. But dragons are very specific. We weren't going to have 0-1 dragons. You're not going to have 12 mana unplayable dragons. They're a narrow band. In this world, the metaphysics of this world, dragons emerge fully formed from dragon tempests. So there aren't dragon eggs, dragon hatchlings. There are full-grown, honest-to-God dragons. So how could we have that many of them while they were still in a narrow band? And that was tough to do. We were playing in a small power and toughness window. We were playing in a small mana cost window. The main way we got to spread it out is just with color diversification. This wasn't a set in which dragons are red, the end. Dragons were for everybody. Dragons were for every color individually, every color pair. So you could have your red dragon and your white dragon and your blue-black dragon, and that would enable them to spread out while still inhabiting this narrow band of mechanical numbers.
Okay, so here's the problem. We want to set stuff to the gills with dragons. But dragons are giant flying creatures. They end games. And so the point is, how do you infuse a set with lots of dragons when every single dragon, normally in a game, if you get a dragon out, you're like, this game's ending soon, I got a dragon. And we're like, no, we want an environment where everybody's playing dragons, especially in limited. So how do we make it, how do you fit that number of dragons in the design and not have dragons overwhelm everything? And that was a very delicate touch.
Where possible, design sought to have the dragons be the embodiment of their clans. We couldn't do it in all cases, but when we could find a dragon ability that played well with that dragon clan's keyword ability, that was gold. So, for example, Pristine Skywise plays beautifully with Rebound.
Deathbringer Regent was a very fun dragon to work on in this design team. It was originally submitted as a card that when it entered the battlefield, it destroyed 6 target creatures. That's a very exciting line of text, and it's also a very dangerous one. It could lead to a very oppressive card. So we played around with a number of different ways to word that, a number of different ways that he could come in and cause mass destruction. I believe at one point you were able to choose up to 6 target creatures, which was clearly the most oppressive version. Where we ended up was that if there are 5 other creatures, then he eats them all.
So Thunderbreak Regent is an example of what I would call a more interactive version of the hexproof keyword that we've been used. So instead of you just can't interact with this creature, you can, but hey, Thunderbreak Regent's gonna smack you in the face.
One of the constraints Creative gave to us in this world was that there were no baby dragons. The dragons all come from dragon tempests. And so they're formed, as adults, essentially. That meant that we had to figure out a way to incorporate dragons without having small dragons. One of the ways we did this was adding the Megamorph cycle, so there were dragons that you could play on turn 3, but weren't necessarily, little 2/2s or something like that.
So the uncommon cycle of Megamorph dragons, they all have very similar things going on. They cost 6, they Megamorph for 7, they all fly, they're all 3/3s. When you turn them face up, they become a 4/4 because of Megamorph, and finally they add a counter to all your other dragons. So This is doing a lot of things. It's letting you play more dragons in your deck. You have a 3-drop in your high mana cost dragon deck because you can Megamorph it. It rewards you for playing other dragons because the turn face up trigger rewards your other dragons. And we did this over and over with a 5-card cycle to repeat these kind of themes that we wanted to happen.
The hope was during the draft that these dragons would be more likely to get picked around. We wanted people to build tribal dragon decks, and so if everyone's just first picking, second picking a dragon, everyone sort of ends up with the same number of dragons. So these were dragons that were actually during a draft meant to sort of float around the table, and that somebody could actually pick up a bunch of dragons and be more likely to turn on their cards that rewarded them for having dragons.
There are lots of dragons in this set. You want a bunch of them. This individual one isn't going to take over the game, but it's going to play a very key role in your dragon deck.
So Enduring Scalelord is perhaps the most fun dragon that you could have on the battlefield because when you bolster your other creatures, the Enduring Scalelord also gets to piggyback and have extra counters added. If you have 2 Enduring Scalelords, they actually trigger on each other. You can make them as big as you want.
For Dragons of Tarkir, we knew we were making the dragon set. Now, we asked ourselves, why are we making the dragon set? Because players love dragons. Why do players love dragons? Because they're huge, kick-ass creatures. Now, this posed an interesting challenge for us in how do you craft an environment completely around huge, kick-ass creatures that tends to steal the upper end of the magic curve.
The easiest way to do that was to make spells that got a bonus when you had a dragon in your hand or in play. That way, it wasn't just, I have a dragon in play, I have a second dragon in play, I have a third dragon in play, I'm already kind of winning at that point. Instead, we will let you cast Draconic Roar on turn 2, revealing a dragon, give them the kind of, here's what's coming for you idea, and still be able to play with your dragons even though you can't quite cast them yet.
Silumgar's Scorn is in a cycle of spells that want you to have a dragon, control a dragon. At first, we only let you reveal a dragon, but then you would be sad if you actually played your dragon because now your spell's less powerful. So we ultimately let you reveal one or actually control one, and in either case, you would have the powered up version of your spell.
It was important to the design team that there was a dream of letting Dragon Tribal work, and it's kind of hard to work in Limited, but certainly in Constructed, you can build a deck that's just full of dragons. So things like Dragon Lord Servant, well, that makes your dragons cost 1 less. All of a sudden, instead of casting dragons on turns 5 and 6, all of a sudden you're casting them on turns 4 and 5. And Dragon Tempest is a card where you cast it on turn 2, all of a sudden your first dragon, well, that's okay, but your second and third dragons, they're really tearing up the board.
We've never done gold commands before, so this was kind of new territory. We built them like a Tarkis command with a red ability, green ability, green ability, and ultimately, you have to make each choice relatively equal to each other choice because the very best 2 choices will actually determine what the whole thing is actually going to cost in mana. And we don't want to end up with a card where you only choose the 2 best modes. We wanted everything to be equal. So it's actually a problem where you need to choose the mana cost first and decide what can belong on the card.
And as well, one of the important things with the commands was quite simply just putting something at a lower mana cost that would be just this really iconic part of the set. We knew that the higher mana costs were going to be filled up with your dragons. We wanted to make sure that this was something that could slot in reliably into the lower parts of your curve and tie in thematically with the Dragon Lords and the other dragons.
Dromoka's command was one of the ones that we were really trying to figure out how to place it so it would fit well into the current standard metagame. The ability to prevent damage was there so that cards like Anger of the Gods wouldn't be able to just wipe out all your small creatures. Sacrificing Enchantments is there because, well, we kind of knew how good Courser was, as well as many other enchantments that are running around standard due to Theros. Want to have an answer there. Then you could put a +1/+1 counter on it because, well, that's always pretty good. It's a great combat trick. And fighting, especially when combined with the +1/+1 counter, gives you a great way to have a pretty powerful removal spell in 2 colors that are really not very well known for their powerful removal.
Okay, so this year is my 20th year working at Wizards, and I've worked on a lot of sets. 20 years worth of sets. And I've done a lot of blocks. And this is the tip of the hat, the bow out of the 3-set block. And the thing that I'm really proud of is Like, the reason we changed away from 3-step blocks is that they're really hard. I mean, really, really hard to do. But like, I feel like we nailed it on the way out. Like, nailed it! Like, this is what a 3-step block was meant to be. This was like, in some ways, it's the perfect 3-step block. I don't know if it's gonna do better than this. Hey, let's bow out, let's move on to the new thing. And so Dragons of Tarkir brings to an end Tarkir block, the last 3-set block. But for every ending in Magic, there's a beginning, and our next beginning on Inside R&D will be Magic Origins. Join us for that. But until we meet again on Inside R&D, for everyone at Wizards of the Coast, I'm your host, Rich Hagan, saying bye.